The morning started like any other on Cedar Valley Farm. John Mitchell was on his tractor, trying to salvage what was left of his failing crops, when he heard the scream. Racing toward the cliff's edge, he found her, a beautiful woman, inexpensive, riding clothes, desperately clinging to a rocky ledge. With nothing but an old rope and quick thinking, he pulled off a daring rescue. When her security team rushed in offering a fortune in reward money, John simply tipped his hat and walked away. Little did he know, the woman he'd just saved was Catherine Wells, America's most secretive billionaire. What happens when a man who has nothing but his principles meets a woman who can buy anything except genuine kindness? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn crept across Cedar Valley Farm, painting the withered cornfields in shades of amber and gold. John Mitchell had been up since 4, his calloused hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug as he studied the weathered deed hanging on his kitchen wall. The Mitchell name was barely legible after decades behind glass. The elegant script faded, but still proud. Property hereby granted to Samuel Mitchell, Anno Domini, 1932. He traced the familiar morning routine that preceded the rescue. Coffee, weather report, equipment check. Simple rituals that anchored him to the land, just as surely as his grandfather's signature anchored that old deed. The kitchen clock ticked away in the background, marking time until his meeting with Tom Brady. At the bank, "Your daddy would have been proud of what you did yesterday," Martha, his housekeeper of 30 years, said as she set a plate of eggs before him. She'd helped raise him after his mother passed, and these days she was more family than employee. Saving that woman like that, pure Mitchell grit. John merely nodded, his mind on the stack of papers in his office. The latest bank statement showed an increasingly familiar story: mounting debts, declining yields, and prayers for rain that seemed to fall on deaf ears. 4 generations of Mitchells had worked this land, but he might be the last. "Tom's been patient," Martha said, reading his expression. "Known your family since before you were born." "Patience runs out, Martha. Even Tom's got bosses to answer to." The morning sun caught the deed's frame, throwing golden light across the kitchen. John remembered his father's stories about Samuel Mitchell, how he'd mortgaged everything he owned to buy this land during the Depression. "Soil's got long memory, son," his father used to say. "You treat it right, it'll remember. Treat it wrong, it'll remember that too." These days, the soil seemed to be remembering only the drought. Teochew. Years of below-average rainfall had pushed the farm to its limits. Modern irrigation helped, but it couldn't make up for what nature had withheld. The wells were running low, and the new equipment loans were coming due. John finished his breakfast and headed to his office. The morning paper lay unopened on his desk. He couldn't bear to read another story about failing family farms or corporate buyouts. Instead, he pulled out the ledger, running his finger down columns of red ink that told the story of his struggle. A knock at the door interrupted his calculations. Martha stood in the doorway, concern etched on her face. "Tom Brady's here early. Says he needs to talk before you head out to the fields." John's stomach tightened. Bank managers didn't make early morning house calls to deliver good news. He straightened his collar and walked to the front porch where Tom waited, his usual friendly smile replaced by something more somber. "John," Tom said, extending his hand, "wish this was a social call." They settled into the porch chairs, the same chairs where their fathers had once discussed crops and weather and the price of grain. Tom pulled out a folder, and John knew before he opened it what it contained. "Corporate's been reviewing the books," Tom began, his voice heavy with reluctance. "They're calling in loans across the county, giving folks 90 days to—" He trailed off, unable to finish. "To get out," John completed the thought. "You've got more equity than most," Tom offered. "Could probably get a good price if you—" "Sold now before they force the sale." John's voice was quiet but firm. "This land's not for sale, Tom. Never has been." "Times change, John. Your daddy understood that near the end. Why he started talking to those developers before he passed." John's head snapped up. "What developers?" Tom shifted uncomfortably. He never told you? Was in talks with AgriCorp. About selling. Got pretty close too, from what I heard. But then his heart gave out and, well, the revelation hit John like a physical blow. His father, the man who taught him that land was something you stewarded, not something you sold, had considered selling. The thought reopened wounds he'd thought long healed. Martha appeared with coffee, her timing impeccable as always. The pause gave John a moment to collect himself, to push down the confusion and hurt that threatened to surface. 90 days, he finally said, accepting the papers from Tom. That's not much time. I'll do what I can to buy you more, Tom promised, standing to leave. But John, don't wait too long to consider your options. Good land's still worth something, even in a drought. John watched his old friend drive away, dust rising behind his car like the ghosts of past promises. The morning sun was fully up, now burning away the last traces of dew from his failing crops. He had 90 days to save 4 generations of history. 90 days to prove that a Mitchell could still make this land sing. The deed caught the light again as he stepped back inside, its glass reflecting both the past and the uncertain future. Yesterday's rescue seemed like a dream now, faced with the harsh reality of daylight and debt. He had no idea that the woman he'd saved would soon offer both salvation and complication, or that his refusal of her reward would set in motion events that would change not just his life, but the very future of Cedar Valley itself. The glossy magazine cover lay untouched on Catherine Wells' desk, her own face staring back at her. The Invisible Billionaire, Catherine Wells' first and only interview, proclaimed the headline. She hadn't wanted to do it, but James, her PR director, had insisted that AgriCorp's shareholders needed a face to connect with their investments. Ms. Wells, James appeared in her office doorway, tablet in hand. The board is asking about yesterday's incident. Catherine touched her shoulder, still sore from hanging off the cliff. Tell them I'm fine. It was just a riding accident. They're more concerned about the man who helped you. The media's trying to identify him. She thought of her rescuer's weathered face, the quiet dignity in his refusal of her reward. So different from the endless parade of people who wanted something from her. He's not interested in publicity, James. Let's respect that. With all due respect, Ms. Wells, anything involving you becomes news, especially with the AgriCorp acquisition moving forward. The acquisition. Catherine turned. To her window, 40 stories above Manhattan. Somewhere in a folder on her desk was Cedar Valley. Another asset to be acquired, another community to be optimized. She hadn't known that yesterday, when a stranger with an old rope and steady hands had saved her life. The board meetings. In an hour, James reminded her, they'll want to know your plans for the Midwest expansion. Catherine nodded, but her mind was still on the farm, on the curious peace she'd felt there before her horse spooked. She'd chosen that remote trail specifically to escape her suffocating world of boardrooms and balance sheets. She clicked through the preliminary acquisition reports on her tablet. Cedar Valley Farm was listed as a distressed asset, its owner stubbornly refusing to modernize. The satellite photos showed parcels of land that could be consolidated, ancient irrigation systems that could be upgraded, a family home that could be, what, erased? Like all the other family farms AgriCorp had absorbed. James, she called, as he turned to leave. Get me everything you can on John Mitchell. The farmer? James raised an eyebrow. Is that wise? The board won't like personal involvement in target acquisitions. The board isn't hanging off cliffs, James. I want to know about the man who saved my life. An hour later, the file landed. In her inbox, John Mitchell, 4th-generation farmer, widowed, 1 daughter in college, no criminal record, excellent credit history until the drought. The same drought that had made Cedar Valley Farm a prime target for AgriCorp's expansion. Her computer chimed with a meeting reminder. The board was waiting, eager to hear how their brilliant CEO would transform another piece of rural America into a model of corporate efficiency. They'd praise her vision, her boldness, her ability to see past sentiment to the bottom line. But for the first time in her 15 years of running AgriCorp, Catherine felt something she hadn't expected. Doubt. "The board's ready," James announced from the doorway. Catherine gathered her papers, tucking the magazine with her cover story into a drawer. The woman in that photo, carefully crafted by PR experts, seemed as foreign to her now as the dust and desperation of Cedar Valley must seem to her board members. "Coming," she said, but paused at her private bathroom to wash her hands. They were still scratched from gripping the cliff face, real wounds that her manicurist would tisk over later. She studied her reflection. Polished, professional, perfect. Everything John Mitchell wasn't. And yet he was the one who'd walked away from a fortune without a second thought, while she walked toward another meeting that would decide the fate of people she'd never meet. As the elevator carried her toward the boardroom, Catherine made a decision. Before AgriCorp made any moves in Cedar Valley, she needed to understand what she was really buying, and more importantly, what would be lost when the deals were done. And the dust settled. "Ms. Wells," James held the boardroom door open. "They're ready for you." Catherine straightened her jacket and stepped into the room of expectant faces, minds already made up, checkbooks ready to back her play. But instead of her usual confident stride to the head of the table, she felt every step weigh heavy with the gravity of what she was about to set in motion. The broken bridle lay in Catherine's lap as her security team's SUV wound through the dusty roads of Cedar Valley. She ran her fingers over the severed leather, trying to piece together how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. The morning had started perfectly. She'd slipped away from her security detail at dawn, something she did whenever the weight of being Catherine Wells became too heavy. Just her and Midnight, her beloved black mare, on a trail she'd discovered during a property survey of potential AgriCorp acquisitions. "Ma'am," her head of security Richardson spoke from the front seat, "we still need your statement about the incident." Catherine closed her eyes, remembering. The rattlesnake had appeared from nowhere, startling Midnight. One moment she was cantering along the ridge, the next she was airborne. The bridle had snapped when Midnight reared, a clean break that now seemed like fate's handiwork. "I was thrown," she said simply. "The ledge caught me." What she didn't say was how time had slowed in those moments, hanging between earth and sky, how she'd heard the tractor before she saw it, its ancient engine cutting through her panic, how she'd watched a stranger drop everything to race toward her cry for help. "The farmer," Richardson pressed. "Did he recognize you?" "No." She smiled, remembering John Mitchell's face, concerned but calm. No recognition, no calculation, just pure instinctive response to another human being in danger. "We should have him sign an NDA," Richardson continued. "Standard protocol for—" "No!" Catherine cut him off. "No NDAs, no protocols. He didn't ask for anything, and we're not going to ask anything of him." "But, ma'am, the media—" "Will have to find another story." She set the broken bridle aside. "What's our status with local property acquisition?" Richardson shuffled through his tablet. "Cedar Valley Farm is central to the expansion plan. Our analysts say the drought makes it prime for buyout. Owners struggling with loans, but he's resistant to offers." Catherine watched the farmland roll past her window. Failing crops stretched to the horizon, yet someone was still out there every day, fighting a losing battle against nature and economics. She thought of John Mitchell's quiet dignity, as he'd refused her reward money, the way he'd simply turned and walked back to his tractor. "Cancel the morning meetings," she said suddenly, "and find me a local realtor. I want to look at properties in the area." Properties. Richardson's surprise was evident. "The acquisition team already has satellite surveys of—" "Not for AgriCorp," Catherine interrupted. "For me, personally." The SUV slowed at a crossroads. To the left lay the private airstrip and her flight back to Manhattan. To the right, more dusty roads and failing farms. Catherine made another decision. "Take the right turn," she said. "I want to see more of Cedar Valley." As they drove, she thought about the moment John Mitchell's rope had settled around her waist. His voice had been steady, instructing her to hold on, to trust him. She had, without question, she who trusted no one in her corporate world of sharks and hidden agendas. The broken bridle caught the sunlight, its worn leather telling stories of other rides, other mornings of freedom. But it was more than that now. It was a reminder that sometimes things had to break for new possibilities to emerge. "Find out what crops they grow here," she said. "What they used to grow, before the drought. What they could grow, with the right investment." "Ma'am," Richardson seemed lost. "I thought the plan was to consolidate these farms into—" "Plans change, Richardson." Catherine pulled out her phone, beginning to type. "Sometimes they have to." Outside her window, a tractor moved through a distant field. She couldn't tell if it was John Mitchell's or not, but it didn't matter. Something had shifted that morning, as surely as the earth had seemed to shift beneath her when she fell. The broken bridle had saved her life, its failure forcing her off Midnight's back before the horse's panic could carry them both over the cliff. Now she wondered what other blessings might be hidden in broken things. Failed crops, struggling farms, and the unexpected connections that could emerge from moments of crisis. The bank foreclosure notice made a harsh crinkling sound as Tom Brady smoothed it across his desk. "I really wish you weren't showing me this," he said to the woman seated across from him. Catherine Wells, dressed down in jeans and a simple blouse, looked nothing like her magazine covers. "Tell me about John Mitchell," she said quietly. Tom glanced at the notice again, then out his window toward Cedar Valley Farm in the distance. "Known him all my life, known his family longer. They're good people, Ms. Wells, salt of the earth. And the foreclosure? 90 days. Tom's voice was heavy. "Corporates calling in loans all across the county. John's got it better than most. At least he owns his land free and clear. Well, most of it," Catherine leaned forward, "most of it had to mortgage the north section. New irrigation equipment. Would have worked too if the drought hadn't hit." He shook his head. "John Mitchell would die before he'd lose this land, Miss Wells. That's what worries me." The morning sun caught the foreclosure notice's red stamp, final notice. Catherine thought of her board meeting the day before, how easily they'd discussed consolidating assets and optimizing agricultural output. Sterile words for stealing people's lives. "What would it take," she asked, "to save the farm?" Tom named a figure that would have made most people wince. Catherine didn't blink. "If someone were to pay off the loans," she said carefully, anonymously, "John wouldn't accept it." Tom's response was immediate. "Man's got his pride, same pride that made him walk away from your reward money." Catherine smiled. "He doesn't know who I am." "No," Tom agreed, "but he knows who he is." The conversation stayed with Catherine as she drove through Cedar Valley later that day. She told her security team she was scouting properties, but really she was trying to understand this place that seemed to exist in a different world from her Manhattan offices. Her phone buzzed. James, with another urgent message about the board wanting updates. She ignored it, pulling over instead to watch a farmer in a distant field. Even from here, she could see the practiced efficiency of his movements, the way he worked with his equipment like it was an extension of himself. The drought had left its mark everywhere. Stunted cornstalks, dusty roads, worried faces in the diner where she'd stopped for coffee. But there was something else, too. A stubborn resilience, a refusal to give up. She thought of John Mitchell, calmly walking away from enough money to solve all his problems. Back in her rental car, Catherine pulled out her tablet and began to work. If John Mitchell wouldn't accept direct help, perhaps there were other ways. She spent the afternoon making calls, consulting experts, studying agricultural reports. By sunset, she had the beginnings of a plan. "I need you to set up a shell company," she told her lawyer that evening. "Something local, untraceable. The board won't like this," he warned. "The board doesn't need to know." She watched the sun setting over Cedar Valley's fields. "This is personal." Over the next week, things began to happen in Cedar Valley. The local bank mysteriously found reasons to extend loan deadlines. Agricultural experts appeared, offering free consultations about drought-resistant crops. A government grant writer reached out to Tom Brady, mentioning programs that might help local farmers. Catherine watched it all from a distance, careful, to keep her name out of everything. But she couldn't stay completely away. She found herself driving the dusty roads almost daily, watching John Mitchell work his land with the same determination she brought to her corporate deals. One evening she parked at the edge of his property, just watching. The setting sun turned his fields golden, and for a moment she could see what he was fighting so hard to save. It wasn't just land. It was legacy, identity, purpose. Her phone buzzed again. More messages from the board, more questions about the AgriCorp expansion. She'd been stalling them, making excuses about additional research needed. But she couldn't hold them off forever. The foreclosure notice in Tom's office had started a clock ticking. 90 days to save a farm, to preserve a way of life, to figure out why the sight of a proud man working failing land had touched something deep inside her that all her billions had never reached. As if sensing her thoughts, a figure appeared on the horizon. John Mitchell, heading in for the evening. Catherine watched him walk toward his house. Straight back, despite the weight she knew he carried. She thought of the moment he'd pulled her from the cliff, how sure his hands had been, how solid his presence. She picked up her phone and dialed James. "I need you to do something," she said when he answered, "and I need you to not ask why. The board meeting is tomorrow," he reminded her. "They're expecting the expansion plans." Catherine watched John's porchlight come on, a warm glow in the gathering dusk. "The plans are changing," she said. "We're going to save these farms, James, all of them." "That's not what the shareholders—" "Sometimes," she interrupted, thinking of a broken bridle and an old rope and hands that hadn't hesitated to help a stranger. "Doing the right thing is more important than doing the profitable thing." She ended the call and sat in the growing darkness, watching the lights of Cedar Valley Farm. Tomorrow she would face her board and begin the fight of her career. But tonight she let herself imagine a future where success wasn't measured in quarterly profits. A future that somehow included a proud farmer who'd reminded her what real values looked like. The foreclosure notice had started something all right, but not what the bank had intended. Instead of marking an ending, it had become a beginning. Of what, Catherine wasn't yet sure, but for the first time in years she was excited to find out. Martha was cleaning the study when she found the old newspaper clipping, yellowed with age, tucked inside John's father's Bible. "Mitchell stands firm. Local farmer refuses $1 million buyout." The photo showed a younger Robert Mitchell, John's father, standing proud in front of the farmhouse, 20 years younger, but wearing the same determined expression his son now carried. "Found something you might want to see," she called to John, who was reviewing mysterious new loan documents from the bank. He took the clipping, his eyes scanning the faded text. The article detailed his father's refusal to sell to Midwest Agricultural Corporation in 1995, despite facing similar drought conditions. The reporter had asked Robert Mitchell why he'd turned down life-changing money. His response, "Some things are worth more than money. This land doesn't just grow crops, it grows character." "Funny how history repeats," Martha said softly, watching John's face. "Tom came by again this morning," John replied, setting the clipping aside. "Says there's some new government program, drought assistance, agricultural development grants. Timing seems convenient." Martha busied herself with dusting the shelves. "Maybe the good Lord's showing you a path. Or maybe someone's trying to buy my pride with paperwork instead of cash." John stood, walking to the window. The afternoon sun illuminated his fields, where the irrigation consultant he hadn't asked for was testing soil samples. First the loan extension, now these experts showing up. "You think it's her, the woman you saved?" John watched the consultant work, remembering the feel of the rope in his hands, the trust in a stranger's eyes. "Don't know. Can't prove anything." "Would it be so terrible?" Martha asked. "Accepting help when it's offered?" John picked up the newspaper clipping again. Dad used to say a man's character is built by the choices he makes when things are hardest. Your father also believed in adapting, Martha countered. Remember when he switched to hybrid seeds? Everyone said he was betraying tradition. The phone rang before John could respond. It was Sarah, his daughter, calling from college. He listened as she excitedly told him about a new agricultural scholarship she'd received, one specifically for children of independent farmers affected by drought conditions. After the call, he sat heavily in his father's old chair. Another convenient coincidence. The scholarship would cover Sarah's remaining 2 years, erasing one of his heaviest burdens. But the timing, sometimes, Martha said, straightening. The Bible on its shelf, pride can blind us to blessings. Your father stood firm against a buyout because they wanted to destroy the farm. These folks seem to want to save it. John looked again at the newspaper clipping, at his father's determined face. The article's final quote caught his eye. A Mitchell doesn't just protect this land from nature's hardships. We protect it from those who'd erase its history. But we're not too proud to embrace changes that help us preserve what matters most. Outside, the irrigation consultant was packing up his equipment. Tomorrow, according to Tom, a soil rehabilitation specialist would arrive. All part of a new county-wide farming initiative, supposedly. Each expert offering a piece of hope, wrapped in professional recommendations and technical expertise. John thought of the woman on the cliff, how accepting his help hadn't diminished her. How trust, freely given and received, had created something pure in that moment of crisis. The newspaper clipping seemed to whisper his father's words. Preserve what matters most. Maybe, John thought, watching the sun paint his struggling fields in shades of gold, that preservation could come in forms he hadn't expected. Maybe there was a difference between accepting defeat and accepting help. Martha quietly left him with his thoughts, the Bible and newspaper clipping a silent testament to the choices that shaped not just land, but legacy. In the distance, a car he didn't recognize drove slowly past his property. He couldn't see the driver, but somehow he knew. The woman from the cliff was watching, waiting to see if a proud farmer could learn what she already had. That sometimes strength lies not in standing alone, but in allowing others to stand with you. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, bearing the Cedar Valley Bank's official letterhead. John read it 3 times at his kitchen table, each reading making less sense than the last. The bank was restructuring local agricultural loans due to a new partnership with an anonymous regional investment group. His 90-day foreclosure deadline had been extended to a full year, with revised terms that seemed almost too good to be true. "Someone's watching out for you," Tom said when John called to verify the letter's authenticity. "The whole valley, actually. Every struggling farm in the county got similar notices." "Who's behind it?" "Can't say," Tom replied. But something in his voice made John suspect he knew more than he was letting on. Investment group wants to remain anonymous. They're interested in sustainable farming, community preservation. Good things, John. After hanging up, John walked his property, the letter folded in his back pocket. The irrigation consultant's recommendations had been solid. Drought-resistant crops, modern water management techniques, soil amendments that could help retain moisture. All part of the mysterious grant program that had appeared out of nowhere. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Dad, my advisor says there's an internship opening at the Agricultural Research Center. They're studying drought adaptation techniques, and they're specifically looking for students from farming families." Another convenient coincidence. John stopped at the edge of his north field, where the new soil sensors were sending data to an app he hadn't wanted, but now checked dozens of times a day. The technology was helping, he had to admit, but the pattern of anonymous assistance was becoming harder to ignore. A sleek car drove past on the distant road, the same one he'd been seeing regularly. This time he caught a glimpse of the driver, a woman with dark hair, quickly turning away as she passed. his mysterious benefactor, making another drive-by inspection of her investment. The funny thing was, he wasn't angry. He should have been. His pride had always been as sturdy as the old oak tree marking his property line. But something had shifted since that morning on the cliff. The woman's face, as he'd pulled her to safety, the pure gratitude in her eyes, had reminded him of something his father used to say. True giving goes both ways. Sometimes letting someone help you is a gift in itself. Martha found him still, standing there at sunset. "Another letter came while you were out," she said, handing him an envelope from the agricultural department. "They're expanding the drought assistance program, something about new research funding." John looked at the envelope, then at the distant road where the black car had vanished. "She's not going to stop, is she? The woman you saved?" Martha smiled. "Would you, in her position?" He thought about it, about what he would do if he had the means to help someone who'd risked their life for him. Someone too proud to accept direct assistance, but whose entire way of life was threatening to slip away. "Guess I taught her something." "That day on the cliff," he said finally, "about helping people who need it. And maybe," Martha suggested gently, "she's teaching you something too." The sun was setting over his fields, painting the struggling crops in shades of promise. The soil sensors blinked their steady green lights, monitoring moisture levels and sending data to agricultural experts he hadn't asked for, but had come to rely on. His daughter was thriving in college, her future suddenly more secure. And now, this letter offering time, the one thing he'd needed most. Anonymous or not, these weren't handouts. They were investments in the future of Cedar Valley, in the preservation of something worth saving. Just as he hadn't hesitated to help a stranger in danger, someone wasn't hesitating to help his entire community find a way forward. John pulled the bank letter from his pocket one more time. The terms were fair, the conditions focused on sustainable farming practices and community involvement. His father would have recognized it for what it was. Not a buyout, but a buy-in. Someone believing in Cedar Valley enough to fight for its future. As if on cue, the black car appeared again in the distance. This time, John raised his hand in acknowledgement. The car slowed briefly, and though he couldn't see clearly through the tinted windows, he was certain the driver had smiled. The farmer's market flyer fluttered in the morning breeze, its cheerful announcement of Cedar Valley's first annual heritage. Harvest market drawing curious locals. Catherine had orchestrated the event through one of her shell companies, but looking at the bustling square, she realized it had taken on a life of its own. Local farmers had transformed the town square into a celebration of rural life. Stands overflowed with late summer produce, handcrafted goods, and home-baked treats. The drought might have hurt the big cash crops, but the smaller market gardens, supported by the mysterious grant program, were thriving. "You're the one who started all this," Martha said, appearing beside Catherine's booth of organic honey. Catherine had been using the honey stand as cover for her weekly visits to Cedar Valley. "I don't know what you mean," Catherine replied. Carefully, but Martha's knowing smile told her the housekeeper wasn't fooled. "He's over there." Martha nodded toward the far end of the market. "Selling those drought-resistant tomatoes your experts recommended. Been wondering when you two would finally meet properly." Catherine turned to see John Mitchell arranging produce. At his stand, Sarah helping him set up. The girl had come home for the weekend, eager to share what she was learning in her agricultural program. Catherine had followed Sarah's progress through discreet inquiries, pleased to see her thriving. "Does he know?" Catherine asked quietly. "About you?" "No. About someone watching out for the valley. He suspects." Martha picked up a jar of honey. "You know, sometimes the sweetest things come from the most unexpected places." Catherine smiled at the metaphor. "I should go. My security team gets nervous when I'm in public too long." "Or," Martha suggested, "you could buy some tomatoes. They're quite good." Before Catherine could protest, Martha had taken her arm and was steering her toward John's stand. He was explaining soil chemistry to an elderly couple, his face animated as he discussed the new techniques that had saved his crop. He looked different here, lighter somehow, the weight of worry lifted slightly from his shoulders. "John Mitchell," Martha called out. "Got someone here interested in your famous tomatoes." He turned, and Catherine felt the moment of recognition flash between them. His eyes widened slightly, but to his credit, he didn't react otherwise. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "welcome to Cedar Valley. Your tomatoes come highly recommended," Catherine managed, aware of Martha slipping away, leaving them alone. "New variety," John replied, selecting a few perfect specimens. "Part of a agricultural innovation program." Their fingers brushed as he handed her the bag, and Catherine felt the same steady strength that had pulled her from the cliff edge. "The program seems to be working well. Some might say too well." His voice was quiet, meant only for her. "Lot of fortunate coincidences." Lately, Catherine met his gaze. "Sometimes fortune favors those who help others without asking anything in return." A small smile tugged at his lips. "And sometimes those others find ways to return the favor, whether it's wanted or not." "Dad," Sarah called out, approaching, with a stack of flyers. "The Agricultural Extension Office loved my proposal for the Community Seed Bank. They're going to fund it as part of the Heritage Preservation Initiative." She stopped short, seeing Catherine. "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt." "Not at all," Catherine smiled. "Your father was just telling me about his innovative farming techniques." "Isn't it amazing?" Sarah beamed. "All these new programs supporting local farms? My professors say it could revolutionize how small farms survive droughts." John watched his daughter's enthusiasm, and Catherine saw something soften in his expression. Whatever his suspicions about the source of all this help, his daughter's joy was real. "Sometimes," he said, looking back at Catherine, "the right help comes along at the right time." "Sometimes," Catherine replied, "people just need a chance to help each other." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken understanding. Then Sarah was pulling her father away to meet some college friends, and Catherine was turning back toward her honey stand, but something had shifted. The careful dance of anonymous assistance had become something more personal, more real. Martha reappeared as Catherine gathered her things to leave. "Tomatoes look good," she observed innocently. "They do," Catherine agreed. "Grown by someone who knows the value of doing things right, even if it means accepting help." Catherine watched John across the market, surrounded by community, his daughter proudly showing off the seeds they'd saved for next year's planting. Especially then. The town hall meeting agenda sat unopened on Catherine's desk in her Manhattan office. Its simple typeface and local government letterhead seemed out of place among her sleek corporate reports. Cedar Valley Agricultural Development Forum, discussing a community's future. "The board is getting restless," James said, hovering in her doorway. "They're asking why AgriCorp's expansion plans are stalled." Catherine touched the agenda. Her name wasn't on it, but her influence was everywhere. Discussion of new agricultural grants, community preservation initiatives, sustainable farming practices. "Tell them we're exploring alternative investment strategies," she said. "They don't want alternatives, they want acquisitions." James closed the door. "Catherine, what's really going on in Cedar Valley?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. The local number made her heart skip, but it was just Tom Brady from the bank. "Ms. Wells, we might have a problem. Someone leaked AgriCorp's original acquisition plans to the town council." Catherine closed her eyes. "How bad?" "Meetings tonight. John Mitchell's leading the discussion." Tom paused. "He's got quite a following here. People trust him." Of course they did. She'd watched him build that trust, seen how his careful adoption of the new farming methods had influenced others to try them. His success had become a blueprint for the valley's revival. "I'll handle it," she said, already reaching for her coat. "Handle it how?" James asked as she headed for the door. "The board meeting's in an hour." "Reschedule it." She grabbed the agenda. "I need to be in Cedar Valley." The town hall was packed when she slipped in the back, just as John Mitchell took the podium. He looked different here, authoritative, passionate, his quiet strength focused into leadership. "These programs helping our farms?" he was saying. "They're good programs, real help for real problems, but we need to look at who's behind them." Catherine felt the room tense. Her carefully constructed web of anonymous assistance was about to unravel. "Agricorp wanted to buy us out," John continued. "Still does, according to these documents, but someone's been fighting them. Someone's been investing in us instead of trying to erase us." He pulled out a familiar piece of paper, the bank's loan modification letter. "I did some digging. These programs, the grants, the new agricultural initiatives, they're all funded through a company called Valley Heritage Investments. And Valley Heritage, it's owned by Catherine Wells." The room erupted in murmurs. Catherine stood perfectly still in the shadows as John raised his hand for quiet. "Now, most of you know Ms. Wells as the woman I helped on the cliff that day. What you don't know is she's also the CEO of Agricorp." More murmurs, darker this time. Catherine felt her careful plans crumbling. "But here's the thing," John continued, surprising her. "She could have let Agricorp swallow our farms. Instead, she's been using her own money, her own resources to help us survive, not by buying us out, but by giving us the tools to stay independent." He looked directly at the back of the room, and Catherine knew he'd been aware of her presence all along. "Some folks might say she's just trying to buy our trust. Maybe they're right, but I've seen her out here, watching our farms, learning our ways. And I remember something about her from that day on the cliff. When she was hanging there, she didn't try to buy her way out. She trusted me to help her. Maybe now it's our turn to trust her." The mood in the room shifted. Catherine felt tears threatening as John continued, laying out a vision of partnership between Valley Heritage and the local farms. Not a corporate takeover, but a genuine collaboration. "We've got two paths before us," he concluded. "We can reject this help because we're proud, or we can accept it because we're wise. I know which path my father would choose." As the room erupted in discussion, John finally turned fully toward her. Their eyes met across the crowded space, and Catherine saw in his gaze the same trust she'd placed in him that day on the cliff. She had come to stop her worlds from colliding. Instead, she watched as John Mitchell built a bridge between them, turning what could have been a disaster into an opportunity for something new to grow. Catherine hadn't written in her journal for years. But tonight, the leather-bound book lay open on her desk in the small Cedar Valley rental house she'd taken under an assumed name. "The board thinks I'm conducting due diligence on the agricultural programs. James keeps sending urgent messages about shareholder concerns. But sitting in that town hall tonight, watching John Mitchell defend me to his neighbors, defend me when I'd been hiding the truth from him, I realized something that terrifies me. I'm not just saving these farms anymore. I'm finding pieces of myself I thought I'd lost." She paused, pen hovering over the page. Through her window, she could see the lights of Cedar Valley Farm in the distance. He knew. All this time, he knew who I was, what I was doing. But instead of exposing me, he did something far more dangerous. He understood me. A knock at her door startled her. Martha stood on the porch, holding a basket of those infamous tomatoes. "Thought you might be up," the housekeeper said, stepping inside. "Quite a performance tonight." Catherine closed her journal. "You knew I was staying here? Honey, there ain't much in this valley I don't know about." Martha set the basket down, including why a billionaire CEO is hiding out in a rental house instead of staying at the Cedar Valley Inn. "I needed to be closer," Catherine admitted, "to understand. The farm, the community." Martha's eyes were kind. "Or maybe just one particular farmer?" Catherine touched her journal. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to those who know where to look." Martha settled into a chair. "You know what John said to me after the meeting? Said he'd never met anyone who worked so hard to help people who didn't trust her. I betrayed that trust by hiding who I was." "Did you?" Martha picked up a tomato, examining it. Seems to me you showed exactly who you are. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, but the woman who cared enough to save something worth saving. Catherine opened her journal again, reading her last lines. I don't know how to be both people, Martha. Catherine Wells, corporate CEO, and Catherine who drives dusty roads watching farmers work. Maybe you don't have to choose. Martha stood, heading for the door. Maybe that's what John was trying to tell everyone tonight. Sometimes the best crops come from crossing different seeds. After Martha left, Catherine returned to her journal. The first time I saw Cedar Valley, it was through satellite images in an acquisition report. Statistics, profit projections, assets to be liquidated. Now I see it through John Mitchell's eyes. Legacy, community, something worth fighting for. He's teaching me what my wealth could really mean if I'm brave enough to use it differently. She walked to the window. A tractor's headlights moved across the distant fields. John working late again. The sight was so familiar now, it made her chest ache. I came here to save a man who saved me, but he's not the one who needed saving. Every time I see him with his daughter, every time he stands up in front of his community, every time he chooses, the harder right over, the easier wrong, he shows me what real wealth looks like. And now, I don't know if I can go back to boardrooms and balance sheets and treating communities like assets to be optimized. The tractor lights went dark. In her mind, she could see John walking back to his house, tired but content, connected to his land in ways her money could never buy. The board wants their expansion plans. The shareholders want their returns. But tonight, I watched a man risk everything to defend me, when I'd given him every reason to do the opposite. He didn't just save my life that day on the cliff. He's saving my soul, one quiet act of integrity at a time. She closed the journal, but not before writing one final line. I thought I was the one giving help, but standing in the back of that town hall, watching him build a bridge between my two worlds, I realized something. Sometimes the greatest gift is letting someone else save you. The lights of Cedar Valley Farm winked out one by one, until only her own window glowed in the darkness. Tomorrow she would have to face her board, explain her actions, defend her choices. But tonight, in the quiet of her borrowed home, Catherine Wells finally admitted what her journal already knew. She was falling in love not just with a farm or a community, but with the man who'd shown her what real value looked like. The weather warning crackled over the emergency radio in John's kitchen. Severe thunderstorm warning for Cedar Valley County. Potential for flash flooding, high winds and quarter-sized hail. All residents advised to seek immediate shelter. After 3 years of drought, the rain they'd prayed for was coming, all at once. Sarah's flight got diverted, Martha said, hanging up the phone. She's safe in Chicago, but a massive thunderclap cut her off, rattling the windows. John studied the radar on his new tablet, another grant program gift that right now seemed heaven-sent. The storm cell was massive, its red core aimed straight at Cedar Valley. His phone buzzed. Tom Brady. John, we're organizing at the community center. Sandbags, emergency supplies, your new irrigation channels. Might help divert some flooding, John finished. I'll be there in 10. He was pulling on his rain gear when a familiar black car skidded into his driveway. Catherine jumped out, already drenched. You're Southfield, she said without preamble. The runoff modeling shows it's directly in the flood path, but if we redirect the water flow through the irrigation channels, you should be in Manhattan. John interrupted. Board meeting can wait. This can't. She held up her tablet, showing topographical overlays. I've got heavy equipment on standby, engineers ready to consult. Thunder cracked again, closer this time. John saw the same determination in her eyes that he'd felt in himself that day on the cliff. No hesitation, no calculation, just the need to help. Martha, he called, get on the emergency phone tree. Tell everyone who's got the new irrigation systems to open the retention gates. The rain was coming sideways now as they raced to the south field in John's truck. Catherine's security team followed in their SUV, looking distinctly unhappy about their boss being out in the storm. There! Catherine pointed through the streaking windshield. The new irrigation channel was already straining with rusty runoff. They worked in seamless synchronization, John operating the tractor to shore up the channel walls, while Catherine coordinated with her engineers over the phone, directing the water flow to protect both the crops and the town downstream. More trucks arrived, neighbors with sandbags, kids from the high school ag program, farmers from across the valley. The community Catherine had helped rebuild now moved like a well-oiled machine, each person knowing their role. "Mitchell," Tom Brady's voice carried over the storm. "River's cresting. We need to divert more water." John looked at Catherine, both of them soaked to the skin. She nodded, understanding without words. They'd built these defenses together, one hidden investment at a time. Now they'd defend them together, hours blurred as they fought the storm. John saw Catherine everywhere, helping stack sandbags, coordinating with emergency services, her corporate polish washed away by rain and purpose. She belonged here, he realized, not as a CEO studying an investment, but as someone who cared enough to stand in the mud and fight. Near midnight, the rain finally slackened. John found Catherine at the edge of his south field, watching the water flow safely through the channels they'd dug. "You saved more than the farms," he said quietly. "These irrigation systems, the soil, conservation, the community coordination. Without them, this storm would have washed away half the valley." "We saved it," she corrected. "All of us. Together." She turned to face him, rain dripping from her hair. "That's what you were trying to tell everyone at the town hall, isn't it? That sometimes the best solutions come from unlikely partnerships." Lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating the valley they'd protected. John saw his father's weathered face in his mind. The land doesn't just grow crops, it grows character. "You know," he said, "when I pulled you up from that cliff, I thought that was the end of the story. Local farmer helps stranger, goes back to his quiet life." Catherine smiled. Instead, the stranger couldn't stop herself from helping back, couldn't stop herself from caring, John corrected gently. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken things. Then Martha's voice called from the house, breaking the spell. "Emergency services wants an update," she said. "And Sarah's on the phone, worried sick about both of you." They turned toward the house, but Catherine paused. "John, thank you for defending me at the town hall, for seeing what I was trying to do, even when I was hiding." "Nothing to defend," he replied. "You showed us who you really are tonight. Not with money or programs, but with this." He gestured at her mud-covered clothes, her wind-blown hair. "Sometimes a storm shows us what we're really made of." The valley stretched out before them, battered but unbroken, like the cliff rescue that had started everything. The storm had stripped away pretenses, leaving only what mattered. Two people who'd discovered that saving things was easier when you didn't try to do it alone. The corporate takeover document appeared on Catherine's desk the morning after the storm. James placed it there while she was still changing out of her mud-stained clothes. "The board called an emergency session," he said. "They're voting to remove you as CEO." Catherine picked up the document, its crisp legal language a stark contrast to the earthy reality of last night. Due to unauthorized allocation of corporate resources, deviation from approved acquisition strategies, breach of fiduciary duty. "They found out about Valley Heritage Investments," James continued. "All of it. The shell companies, the grants, the agricultural programs. Someone's been watching." "You in Cedar Valley?" "Richardson," Catherine said quietly, thinking of her too observant head of security. "He's been reporting to them. They're saying you've gone native, that you're sabotaging AgriCorp's expansion plans to protect one small farming community," and James hesitated. And one particular farmer." Catherine thought of John standing in the rain, working alongside her to save his land. No pretenses, no corporate games, just pure purpose and trust. "The vote's in 2 hours, James said. What do you want me to do?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. Tom Brady's name flashed on the screen. "Turn on the business news," he said without preamble. The TV in her office sprang to life, showing footage of Cedar Valley during the storm, but it wasn't coverage of the community coming together. Instead, the headline read, "AgriCorp CEOs. Secret rural romance. Corporate funds used to woo local farmer." "It's running everywhere," Tom said. "Local stations, national networks. Someone sold them quite a story." Catherine watched in horror as private photos appeared on screen. Her car parked near John's farm, their meeting at the farmer's market, even grainy footage of them working together during the storm. "John's not answering his phone," Tom added. "But Catherine, the reporters aren't just at your office. They're here too." She clicked off the TV, her mind racing. The takeover document suddenly made more sense. This wasn't just about business. This was character assassination, designed to discredit both her professional judgment and her personal integrity. "James," she said, "get me everything we have on the board members' private holdings and call my lawyers." "Already did," he handed her another folder. "You might want to look at who's been buying up AgriCorp shares through offshore accounts." The names jumped out at her. Shell companies linked to her biggest corporate rivals. They hadn't just been watching her work in Cedar Valley. They'd been setting a trap. Her phone buzzed again. Martha this time. "You need to come. Now." "The reporters aren't the problem. It's John. Someone showed him the full AgriCorp acquisition plans. The real ones." Catherine felt her blood run cold. "What real ones?" "The ones showing how Valley Heritage Investments was supposed to be temporary. How once the farms were stabilized, AgriCorp would swoop in and buy everything at a premium. Your signature's on them, Catherine. Dated 6 months ago." The document slipped from Catherine's fingers. She remembered signing it back when Cedar Valley had just been another asset, before she'd known its people, before John had saved more than just her life. "He trusted you," Martha said softly. "We all did." "Those plans changed," Catherine whispered. "I changed. Then you better come prove it, because right now he's at the bank with Tom, ready to sign over his farm to one of AgriCorp's competitors." The next hour passed in a blur. Catherine's security team tried to stop her from leaving. Citing the media circus, she fired them on the spot. James begged her to attend the board meeting remotely. She handed him her resignation letter instead. "You're choosing them," he said, not needing to specify who. "You're choosing him." "No," Catherine replied, grabbing her car keys. "I'm choosing who I want to be." She found John in Tom's office, a contract on the desk before him. Through the bank's windows, she could see reporters gathering, drawn by someone's conveniently timed tip. "Don't sign it," she said from the doorway. John didn't look up. The original plan. All this time, it was just a sophisticated trap. It was, at first. Catherine stepped into the room. But then something happened. Someone showed me what real value looks like. By lying to me? By changing me? She moved closer. "Those plans are real, John. I signed them 6 months ago, but I haven't been that person since the day you pulled me up from that cliff." He finally looked at her, his eyes holding the same hurt she'd seen in the town hall, but this time without the underlying trust. "I've spent my life working with contracts and corporate takeovers," she continued. "Numbers on paper, assets to be optimized. Then I came here and found something money can't buy, something I didn't even know I was looking for. And what was that? A place where a man's word means something, where people measure wealth in generations and trust, not dollars and cents." She gestured at the contract. "Sign that, and you protect your farm from AgriCorp. But you also prove that everything they're saying about us is true, that this was all just business. Wasn't it?" "No." Catherine pulled out her phone, pulling up the resignation letter she'd just sent to her board. "This is who I am now. No. More shells, no more masks. Just a woman who finally found something worth more than a corner office." John read the letter, his expression unreadable. Outside, camera flashes started popping as reporters recognized Catherine through the windows. "You're walking away from everything," he said. "Your company, your position." "Not everything." She held his gaze. "Just the parts that don't matter anymore." Tom Brady cleared his throat. "John, you should see this too." He turned his computer monitor showing a breaking news alert. Catherine Wells donates controlling interest in Valley Heritage Investments to Cedar Valley Agricultural Trust, local farmers to control their own future. I signed that an hour ago, Catherine said quietly. No strings, no hidden agendas. Everything I built here belongs to the community now, whether they still want me around or not. John looked between the contract and Catherine, seeing not the CEO or the billionaire, but the woman who'd stood beside him in the storm, who'd fought for his community as if it were her own.
The trust, he said slowly. It'll need a local leader, someone whose farming has the community's backed. It will, and Agricorp can try to fight it, but their own publicly choosing over shareholders.
Catherine smiled slightly. Makes it hard to paint us as the villains. John stood, leaving the unsigned contract on Tom's desk. You're crazy, you know that? Giving up an empire for a valley. No, Catherine said. I'm giving up an empire for a home, if you'll all still have me. The reporters outside were in a frenzy now, cameras pressed against the bank's windows. In 10 minutes, every business network in the country would be running the story of the CEO who'd walked away from everything. But in Tom Brady's office, time seemed to stop as John Mitchell stepped forward and took Catherine's hand. Welcome, a home, he said softly. And in those 2 words, Catherine heard everything she'd been looking for since the day she'd first seen Cedar Valley as more than just another acquisition target. The farm innovation proposal sat open on John's kitchen table, its pages filled with his careful handwriting and Catherine's elegant notes in the margins. They'd been working on it for days, ever since the media storm had forced both of them to rethink everything. It's not just about saving individual farms anymore, John explained to the group gathered in his kitchen. It's about reinventing how small farms can thrive. Tom Brady leaned forward, studying the financial projections. Martha poured more coffee. Sarah, home from college to help, pulled up supporting research on her laptop. And Catherine, still, adapting to being on this side of corporate proposals, watched John with quiet pride. The trust owns the irrigation patents now, he continued. The soil management techniques, the drought-resistant crop variations, everything Catherine developed here. We can license them to other farming communities, while keeping local control, Tom added, catching on. The profits go back into the trust, funding more innovations. And the educational programs, Sarah chimed in. My professors say our drought adaptation studies could help farms across the Midwest. Catherine touched the proposal's title page. Cedar Valley Agricultural Innovation Center. 6 months ago, she would have seen it as naive idealism. Now she recognized it as something else. Hope, backed by experience and determination. Agricorp's board meets tomorrow, she said. They're voting on whether to pursue hostile takeover. Options. Let them, John replied. We've got something they don't. What's that? Roots. He spread out the satellite photos they'd repurposed from Agricorp's original acquisition plans. Look at what's happened here since Catherine's program started. Soil quality's up, water usage is down, crop yields are stabilizing even in drought conditions. Martha set a fresh cup of coffee by Catherine's hand. Not just the land that's improved, she observed. Look at the community. Young folks coming back, new businesses opening, life returning. Sarah pulled up more data on her laptop. The agricultural program's doubled its enrollment. Students from all over the country wanting to learn sustainable farming techniques. And every one of them, John added, brings their own connections, their own innovations. He looked at Catherine. You didn't just save farms, you created a model for saving rural America. Catherine studied the proposal. Her corporate experience saw the solid business foundation, but her heart saw something more, a vision of future. Harvests, of communities rebuilding, of legacy preserved and renewed. The board won't care about legacy, she said softly. No, John agreed, but their shareholders might, especially when they see the patent values, the licensing potential, the positive press from supporting rural innovation instead of corporate consolidation. Tom Brady tapped the financial projections. He's right. These numbers, Catherine, you've accidentally created something revolutionary here. A way for small farms to compete in the modern agricultural market without losing their souls. Not accidentally, she corrected, looking at John. Someone taught me the difference between price and value. The kitchen fell quiet, everyone feeling the weight of tomorrow's confrontation. Outside, the evening sun painted John's fields gold, the new irrigation systems glinting like threads holding the community together. You know, Sarah said suddenly, my professors keep asking how Cedar Valley managed to adapt to climate change so quickly. They think it's just about the technology. She smiled at Catherine. They don't understand. It was about people first, about trust. Trust, John repeated thoughtfully. That's what we're really growing here, isn't it? Trust in the land, in each other, in the future. Catherine stood, walking to the window. The same view that had once represented assets to be acquired now showed her something different, a tapestry of lives and dreams, innovations and traditions woven together. So, she said, turning back to the group, tomorrow I face my board, but I won't be defending a failed acquisition plan. No, John smiled, holding up the proposal. You'll be offering them something better, a chance to be part of the solution, instead of the problem. The proposal seemed to glow in the evening light, its pages holding not just business plans, but the seeds of transformation. Tomorrow would bring its own storms, but tonight, in a farmhouse kitchen in Cedar Valley, the future was already taking root. Catherine's resignation letter gleamed on the polished boardroom table, its official letterhead stark against the mahogany surface. She'd placed it there deliberately, right next to Cedar Valley's innovation proposal, the contrast between corporate formality and rural revolution impossible to miss. Ms. Wells, the board chairman began, you've put us in an impossible position. Actually, she replied, I've given you an unprecedented opportunity. The boardroom's floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Manhattan's skyline, but Catherine's mind was back in Cedar Valley, remembering John's quiet confidence as they'd finalized their presentation. You want us to abandon a proven acquisition strategy, another board member said, to partner with the very farmers who've been resisting us? Catherine opened the innovation proposal. I want you to recognize that the agricultural industry is changing. Climate change, water scarcity, soil degradation, these aren't just environmental issues, they're business challenges. She brought up the patent valuations on the display screen. Cedar Valley's innovations in drought resistance and soil management, they're worth more than the land they're built on. But they only work because the community trusts us enough to implement them. Trust doesn't pay dividends, someone muttered. No? Catherine pulled up another slide. Licensing inquiries from farming communities across the Midwest. Tell that to the hundreds of farms waiting to participate in our pilot program. They're not just buying technology, they're buying hope, and they're willing to pay for it. The chairman leaned forward. And if we reject this proposal, if we proceed with the original acquisition plan, then I release this. She placed a thumb drive on the table. Documentation of every predatory practice AgriCorp has used against family farms. Every manipulated market, every artificial crisis created to force sales. The room went silent. She saw James, standing by the door, hide a smile. You're betraying your own company, the chairman said quietly. No. Catherine stood, walking, to the windows. I'm saving it. From itself, from becoming everything the public fears about corporate agriculture. She turned back to the board. You know what I learned in Cedar Valley? The same thing that made those farms succeed for generations. You have to give back more than you take. She touched her resignation letter. I'm stepping down as CEO either way, but I'm offering you a choice. Continue with the old way and face years of public backlash and regulatory scrutiny, or join me in building something new. A partnership with farmers, someone scoffed. They'll never trust us. They trust me, Catherine said simply. I've earned it, one decision at a time. And I'm willing to bet everything I have, my shares, my reputation, my future, on this new direction. The chairman studied the innovation proposal. You've changed, Catherine. Yes. She smiled, thinking of a rope, a cliff, and a man who taught her the true meaning of value. Someone showed me what real investment looks like, not just in land or technology, but in people, in community. And this, he lifted the proposal, this is your vision of AgriCorp's future. No, Catherine replied. It's their vision. I just helped them find a way to make it profitable. She watched the board members exchange glances, saw the subtle shift in their expressions as the numbers sank in. The licensing potential, the positive PR, the first-mover advantage in sustainable agriculture, it was all there in black and white. The vote, the chairman said finally, will require time to— You have until sunset, Catherine interrupted. That's when Cedar Valley's Trust Board meets to finalize their independent operational structure. She gathered her papers. You can be part of their future, or you can watch them build it without you. She walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. John Mitchell, the farmer, everyone's been gossiping about. He's not just some rural romantic interest. He's the one who showed me that doing the right thing and making a profit aren't mutually exclusive. The chairman's eyebrows rose. You really believe in this, don't you? Catherine thought of the morning's text from John. Whatever they decide, we've already won. We know who we are. No, she said. I believe in them, in what they've built, in what we can build together. She smiled. The only question is whether AgriCorp is smart enough to believe too. She left them with that thought, her resignation letter a gauntlet thrown on the polished table. By sunset, she'd either have transformed a corporate giant or helped birth its greatest competitor. Either way, she was finally choosing a future she could believe in. The board meeting agenda's final item read simply, Vote on Cedar Valley Proposal. Catherine watched the sun sinking toward the horizon through the boardroom windows, its golden light reminiscent of Cedar Valley's evening fields. In 6 minutes, the trust board would convene in Tom Brady's office, with or without AgriCorp's support. John's voice came through her phone on speaker. The trust board's assembled. Everyone's here. Farmers, local business owners, agricultural students, even got some press outside. The chairman cleared his throat. Mr. Mitchell, since you're on the line, perhaps you'd care to address the board directly? Catherine held her breath. They hadn't planned for this. Well, John's steady voice filled the room. I could talk about crop yields and profit projections, could show you more patents and research data. But that's not what this is really about. He paused, and Catherine could picture him, probably standing at Tom's window, looking out at the community they'd fought so hard to preserve. This morning I watched Sarah, my daughter, teaching a group of high school students about soil, chemistry. These kids who everyone said would leave for the cities, they're staying, they see a future here. The board members shifted in their seats as John continued. Yesterday, 3 more farming communities contacted us about implementing our drought management system. Not because we're the cheapest option, but because we've proven it works. We've lived it. Very touching, one board member interrupted. But sentiment doesn't. 247 patent applications, John cut in. That's how many innovations this sentiment has produced in the past year. Real solutions to real problems, developed by people who actually work the land. Catherine pulled up the relevant data on the display screen, watching the numbers sink in. You want profit? John's voice hardened slightly. Look at your satellite images. Every farm using our methods is showing increased yields despite the drought. But here's what your spreadsheets don't show. Children returning to family farms, main streets coming back to life, communities remembering how to hope. He paused again, and Catherine knew he was thinking of his own family's legacy. Ms. Wells saw it, saw that the real value wasn't in acquiring our lands, but in partnering with our knowledge. She invested in people, not just property, and people, he chuckled softly. Well, we have a way of exceeding corporate expectations. The chairman checked his watch. 3 minutes until the trust board convenes, Mr. Mitchell. Then I'll make this simple. Right now, you're voting on whether to partner with the most innovative agricultural research community in the Midwest. Tomorrow, you'll either be part of our success story or a cautionary tale in corporate short-sightedness. The line went quiet. Catherine watched the board members' faces, seeing the battle between old instincts and new possibilities. One last thing, John added. Catherine Wells didn't go native, as some of you've suggested. She went wise enough to see that real growth doesn't come from consuming communities, but from cultivating them. The chairman reached for the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. We'll proceed with the vote. Actually, John said, that wasn't for you. That was for her. His voice softened. We've got your back, Catherine. Whatever they decide. The line clicked off. Catherine stood, facing the board that had been her whole world for so long. Gentlemen, she said quietly, it's sunset. One. By one, hands raised. The chairman counted slowly, his face unreadable. When he finally spoke, Catherine thought of another moment of truth, hanging from a cliff, trusting a stranger's strength. Motion carries, he announced. AgriCorp will proceed with the Cedar Valley Partnership as proposed. Catherine released the breath she'd been holding, already reaching for her phone. Ms. Wells, the chairman stopped her. The board has one condition. She turned back, wary. We want you to remain as CEO, but with a new mandate, replicate the Cedar Valley model nationwide. He smiled slightly. After all, someone needs to teach corporate America how to grow something besides profits. Catherine thought of John's words. She hadn't gone native. She'd gone wise. I accept, she said, on one condition of my own. The new headquarters for our Sustainable Agriculture Division will be based in Cedar Valley. Among the farmers? Someone asked incredulously. No, Catherine replied, finally dialing John's number. Among the innovators. The new partnership agreement lay unsigned on Tom Brady's desk, its fresh pages marking the beginning of something unprecedented. Outside his office windows, it seemed all of Cedar Valley had gathered, waiting to hear the outcome of both board votes. It's not just a corporate document, Catherine explained to the assembled trust board. It's a blueprint for the future of rural innovation. John picked up the agreement, reading key points aloud. Local control maintained through the trust. Agricultural Innovation Center established as a research hub. Profit sharing structured to benefit participating communities. And AgriCorp, Tom asked, gets exclusive rights to license our innovations, Catherine replied. But with oversight from the trust. They profit by helping other farming communities succeed, not by acquiring them. Sarah, sitting between her father and Catherine, was already sketching plans on her tablet. The university's committed to establishing a satellite campus here. We'll have students from all over the country studying sustainable agriculture in the field. Martha dabbed at her eyes with her apron. Your daddy would be proud, John. This is what he meant about preserving what matters. John looked at Catherine, remembering their journey from that first moment on the cliff to this new beginning. Sometimes, he said quietly, it takes an outsider to help us see what we have. And sometimes, Catherine added, it takes a community to help an outsider find her way home. The trust board members, farmers, teachers, local business owners, began signing the agreement one by one. Each signature represented not just approval, but commitment to a shared vision. There's something else, Catherine said when the last signature was dry. She pulled out another document. AgriCorp's board didn't just approve the partnership, they've authorized the construction of their new sustainable agriculture headquarters right here in Cedar Valley. The room erupted in excited murmurs. John raised an eyebrow at her. You didn't mention this part. Wanted it to be a surprise, she smiled. The CEO needs to be where the innovation is happening. And it turns out I've grown rather fond of the view. Tom Brady chuckled. From corporate raider to local champion. Who'd have thought? I did, Martha said firmly, the moment she refused to let John's rescue be just another business transaction. Outside, the crowd was growing restless. John took Catherine's hand, leading her to the window. Ready to face them? Together, she replied. They stepped onto the bank's front porch, where a podium had been hastily assembled. The setting sun painted everything in shades of promise as John addressed his neighbors. The vote was unanimous, he announced. Cedar Valley will become the heart of a new kind of agricultural revolution. Not one that destroys family farms, but one that helps them thrive. Catherine stepped forward. AgriCorp is proud to be your partner in this vision, not as owners, but as allies in preserving and evolving the farming tradition. The crowd's cheers were interrupted by Sarah rushing out with her tablet. First registration just came in for the Innovation Program. A farming collective from Nebraska wants to implement our water management system. More cheers. Catherine watched John's face as he saw his community's knowledge, their hard-won innovations, beginning to help others. This was what real value looked like, not assets on a balance sheet, but wisdom shared and multiplied. You know, he said as the celebration continued around them, when I threw you that rope on the cliff, I had no idea I was really pulling my whole world up into a new future. And when I drove out here to acquire some struggling farms, Catherine replied, I had no idea I was really finding my way home. The partnership agreement, safely preserved in Tom's office, was more than a corporate document. It was proof that sometimes the best investments couldn't be measured in dollars. They could only be measured in trust, in community, and in the kind of love that grew slowly and surely, like crops reaching toward the sun. Martha appeared with champagne. To new beginnings, she toasted. To old wisdom, John added. To both, Catherine finished, watching the sunset paint Cedar Valley in the same golden light that had first shown her its true worth. The celebration lasted well into the evening, but the real story was just beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that their model could work. But tonight they celebrated the simple truth that had started everything. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as accidents, and sometimes saving someone else shows you how to save yourself. The wedding invitation captured everything about their story in its simple elegance. Under the open skies of Cedar Valley Farm, Catherine Wells and John Mitchell request the honor of your presence as they unite their lives, their dreams, and their communities. Martha had found Catherine, staring at it that morning, touching the embossed letters that somehow made everything feel real. Having second thoughts? She'd asked. No, Catherine smiled, just thinking about how different this is from what I'd planned a year ago. Now, standing in John's kitchen, soon to be their kitchen, Catherine watched the caterers setting up. In the field where she'd once planned corporate acquisitions, the new AgriCorp Sustainable Agriculture headquarters gleamed in the distance, its modern lines somehow fitting perfectly into the rural landscape. Sarah burst in, already in her maid-of-honor dress. Mom would have loved this, she told her father, who was attempting to tie his bow tie. All of it, the Innovation Center, the teaching programs, and especially Catherine. John caught Catherine's eye in the mirror. She would have. She always said the farm needed a woman's touch. Just not quite the corporate takeover she had in mind. Catherine teased, moving to help with his tie. Through the window, they could see guests arriving. Board members in expensive suits mingling with farmers in their Sunday best, agricultural, students chatting with corporate executives, two worlds finding common ground on the soil that had brought them together. Tom Brady appeared in the doorway. They're ready for you both. Martha shooed them toward the door, dabbing at her eyes. Go on. Go show everyone what can happen when you catch someone falling. As they walked toward the ceremony setup, Catherine squeezed John's hand. Think we'll ever live down that cliff rescue? Hope not, he replied. Best business decision I ever made. The wedding invitation had asked guests not to bring gifts, but instead to contribute to the Cedar Valley Agricultural Scholarship Fund. Looking at the packed chairs, Catherine knew they'd succeed in this like they had in everything else. By bringing people together, by showing them a better way forward. James, who'd chosen to follow Catherine to the new headquarters, was directing people to their seats. The chairman of AgriCorp sat in the front row, next to Martha and Sarah. Everyone who'd been part of their journey was here to see two people who'd found each other by accident create something extraordinary on purpose. "Ready?" John asked as the music began. Catherine looked at the man who'd taught her the true meaning of value, at the community that had become her home, at the future they were building together. "I've been ready since you threw me that rope." Above them, the open skies of Cedar Valley stretched endless and blue, promising new horizons for them both. The new lasso hung beside the old one in John's office. Now, their office. Catherine smiled. At them daily, twin symbols of rescue and renaissance. One had saved her life on a cliff's edge. The other, gifted at their wedding, represented their shared future. Different ropes, same strength, woven together like their lives, saving each other, saving everything.